Hello and welcome to Lifelong Wellness Book Club. I am Pauline and I'm exploring self care books. And I invite you to join me on my journey. And I hope you will share with me yours as well. On today's episode, we are discussing No Mud, No Lotus The Art of Transforming Suffering by Nhat Hanh. In this book, he discusses concepts of happiness, suffering, and gives us strategies to be happy, and it's a completely different view about happiness and suffering, and he really helps us see suffering and happiness in a new light, and even the relationship between suffering and happiness seems to be completely different from what we tend to think about it as. And before we move on to the discussion of the book, I briefly wanted to let you know about my expectations of what you might find here in this book club today. If you're seeking long term health and well being, then I hope this place provides you with ideas and perspectives that you will find foundational to lifelong happiness. And if you are suffering from unclear pathways to healing because you're suffering from certain chronic illness conditions such as chronic pain, PCOS, fibromyalgia, hypermobility syndrome, and other conditions, then may you be able to find ideas and perspectives that will help you enjoy your life before you find solutions to your conditions. And if you're suffering from stress and burnout, I hope you'll find something, some ideas, some perspective that'll help you stop stress take over your life. So here it's not a book review. I will not be giving summary or my reviews. Rather, I will be sharing with you my interpretation of what Thich Nhat Hanh says. Those are my understanding of his words. My main aim is to share with you the aha moments I had when I was reading the book. I really loved them and I wanted to share it with them. I thought you'd like them too. Thich Nhat Hanh's book, No Mud, No Lotus, is a treasure. It has a wealth of goodness in it, so it cannot be contained in one episode. As a result, I have decided that I'll continue to discuss No Mud, No Lotus in the upcoming episodes as well. In his book, Han talks about the arrow, like there's one arrow and many arrows. So when an arrow hits our body, it pains. And then, if there's more than one arrow that keeps hitting the same part of our body, then our pain becomes much more. Let's take an example of a chronic illness. It says that the first arrow could be pain caused by an illness. But then the second, third, fourth arrow that continues to hit us is our own thoughts, fears, worries, anxieties, catastrophizing about the first arrow itself. Oh, is this ever going to be well or not? Am I ever going to be healthy? Is this possible to even cure this? Why is it taking so long? So, those are the different kinds of other arrows that we create ourselves that hit us and that magnifies our pain. So basically, what Han says is that we need to release the unnecessary arrows so that we can preserve our energy. And in that way, we will be able to direct more of our resources and our energy to deal with the first arrow. I mean, like, it feels like he is trying to suggest and help us to do precisely this, that is, preserve our energy for the first one by releasing the several other arrows that we create ourselves. And I feel like he really did help me do that. Well, oftentimes we think that happiness is at the end of suffering. Well, I give you an example of myself. I'm suffering from chronic health conditions, so it's kind of painful, it's uncomfortable, and it's only natural for us to want for the pain to end soon. And sometimes we feel like it's only when the pain ends then I can finally be happy. But then, with certain health conditions like mine, it's a lot of self management. The pathway to healing is not very clear. And I have been doing meditations as well. But then again, the uncertainty of healing, the uncertainty that the pain might ever go away is kind of hard. So I was magnifying my own pain in my body like the other arrows. So I remember one of these evenings when I was feeling quite stiff, my whole body was aching. I felt like there was a cloud over my head. It felt like I was climbing a mountain for years and I had not reached anywhere. And that's the reason why I was wanting to learn more on self care and found Thich Nhat Hanh's book. Han discusses happiness during suffering. He says that happiness is here and now, and it's just a matter of learning to tap into it. And how we do that is by suffering well. So, how do we suffer well? He gives several strategies, and among them, the two of them are acknowledging it and transforming it. I understood his idea of acknowledging suffering as facing it, running it, and not hiding from it. And I was reminded about a TV series that I watched a few years ago. I don't remember much of it, so I just went back and tried to figure out which TV series it was, and it was a BBC drama, Line of Duty. I don't remember much about the plot, but I do remember the story of a character, Rose Huntley. She's a law enforcement officer and she's under a lot of pressure to prove herself. So, whatever happens to her is what was very striking to me, and I still remember it. So, basically, she injures her arm, and the circumstances is such that she cannot reveal it to anybody. So, she just has to hide it. Her wound keeps getting worse, and still she cannot attend to it. She cannot acknowledge it. And one day, she wakes up in a hospital bed and realizes that she does not have an arm. She finds out that the doctors had to decide between her arm or her life because the wound had gotten so worse that it had become very toxic to her life itself. So, this striking story made me realize that pretending that everything is okay and ignoring suffering or whatever is out there is not an option. Han gives an example of a baby crying. When the baby is crying, the parents don't ignore the baby. Rather, the baby is crying because it's a signal. So the parents go and embrace the baby. They try to give it attention. They try to understand what's wrong and why is the baby crying. And there's so much care and love involved in attending to the baby. So that's how we can be with our feelings and our sufferings as well. That's how we acknowledge it. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about the mud and the lotus. Well, basically, when we first think about mud, mostly we think it as dirty, as not important. But then lotus is beautiful and it grows in the mud. It does not grow in the mud despite the mud. Rather, lotus needs the mud to bloom. Well, this is quite a good example of how happiness and suffering coexist. The new perspective on suffering and happiness then is that suffering is not an obstacle to our happiness. Suffering can fuel our happiness instead, and our suffering does not need to end for us to be happy. So basically, it may not even be a new idea to you, but then when we're in the middle of our battles of our life, well, it can be quite helpful to have that reminder. And having this reminder to me from Thich Nhat Hanh's reading was very liberating. I was like, yes, I don't need my health issues to be resolved. I'm not dependent upon the diagnosis. I can be happy even before my journey to healing is over. You may be thinking, what if the suffering is not caused by us? What if the suffering caused by somebody else? What if it's the structure? What if we are standing up against historical injustices and seeking justice? And I'm saying that we are not trying to take the concept of suffering well to replace seeking justice. I'll give an example of pain itself. If you have suffered from chronic pain or fibromyalgia or some kind of issues that have remained undiagnosed, I know you've come up across one or the other people like I have, where whatever you do, no matter what physical therapist you go to, things are not getting better, only getting worse. And then there are these people who are dismissing your pain, saying that you're sensitive, or, oh, it's just in your mind, it's just you, it's just your head, it's just you're not able to cope with the stress, and it's just you. So, on one hand, the first arrow is the pain that you are suffering. But on the other hand, these kind of dismissal, judgment, and lack of recognition of our pain and suffering from others is the second arrow. And saying that we need to suffer well is not saying that we have to accept these kind of treatment from other people. These are the second or the external arrows, the other arrows that are coming from external sources. We have to stand up for ourselves. Rather, when we're saying we need to suffer well, I mean it in terms of taking it complementary. We need to stand up for ourselves, we need to seek justice, but at the same time, using this method that Han talks about, suffering well, is about how not to let others control us and how to take back control through self care. I'll give you an example. She's Audre Lorde. She was an American writer, intersectional feminist, professor, philosopher, civil rights activist, and she dedicated her entire life to standing up against injustice. And she also wrote about self care when she was suffering from cancer. And she wrote, "Caring for myself is not self indulgence, it is self preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." So basically, we can say that self care and standing up against injustice does not have to be either or. We can take them both together and they can be complementary. If you're saying, what if I have no energy? I am suffering so much that I do not even have the energy to think about how to think about suffering well. And in that case, I say that you are at the right place. This is the place where I share with you whatever I'm finding in my journey as I am reading more books on self care and wellness. And I'm thinking of updating the description with more resources. So do remember to check it out as well. And I'm also thinking of exploring more of these issues with more concrete steps and strategies in the upcoming episodes. So stay tuned. Well, it's definitely worth reminding ourselves that we can be happy as we suffer, and happiness is possible before the end of a journey. Suffering can be a fuel to happiness, and happiness is here and now. Yeah, I was so excited about my aha moment that I wanted to share the positive vibes around. That's why I'm sharing it with you. If you found it helpful, if you found it positive and would like to spread it around, do share it with your friends. Who knows, they might be at the right moment where they would appreciate a reminder. And if you'd like to spread the positive vibes even more, why don't you subscribe, like, and comment? The algorithm seems to require subscription, likes, and comments so that we can spread this positive vibe around. And if you don't know what to comment, just comment Lotus down there below. In the next episodes, I will continue to discuss Thich Nhat Hanh's book, No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. And as for next episode, I will come back with one of the strategies he talks about to being happy. Check the description below for more resources. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I'll see you again in the next one of Lifelong Wellness Book Club.